Hey, let's paint some Nurgle. I picked up these Gellerpox Infected, hope I got that name right, for Kill Team, and I finished them up just in time for my league to be over, so yay me. But I painted all the guys, big guys, a different icky skin color, and for this one I decided to go with the Jaundice, so I went with a slightly yellow hue to the skin. Won't be a literal jaundice color once we finish up, but I like to have some sort of color theme in mind just to start off with. And the color that we are beginning with, before I forget, is Vallejo Model Color Green Brown. To the green brown, I have added some game color elf skin tone because my plan is to go, as we go towards the highlights, we're going to move towards a more human skin, so we just have a hint of green in the recesses. And I'm dry brushing this layer on because this speeds up the painting process. First we dry brush to get a rough layer on, and then for the next layer, we can layer that same mixture on, so it speeds up the process a little bit. We need a few less layers, and since we're just at the beginning here, a rough dry brush is not going to affect our final results. The difference between the dry brushing and the layering is when you are layering, you may need to add a bit more of your shade color because the way the paint deposits on the surface, you'll notice a difference. The layering, it'll be lighter color than with the dry brushing, so you may have to go back and darken your highlight a little bit. Next, I've added some basic skin tone to the previous mixture, and we continue to work on the highlights. And then for the final highlights, straight basic skin tone, just working them in on the highest raised areas where that light's going to catch. So all that pulled skin, upper areas, knuckles, cheeks, nose, all those standard places. Now it's time to add a little bit of shade. This figure is large enough so we could paint in our shade quite easily, and I have some thinned brown violet here working into the recesses. I have a pretty thin, it's almost a wash consistency. I'm just working it in over and over, repeating the layers where needed to bring up or darken those shade areas as needed. Additional layers for a darker shade. Next, we are going to work in some tints because a diseased, bloated, bruised flesh, you're going to have different colors appearing on the skin tone. And the first color we're going to use for that is Rose Brown. Just trying to working into areas where I think a little color is needed around the faces, like they're stretching out of his arm. Worked a little bit more into the face. I wanted a more warm color to the face, at least initially. And a little bit around the belly area as well. So pretty much anywhere there was something protruding from the skin, I wanted a little bit of redness to it. Next, we use some Dead Flesh to paint in all the protruding veins. And there's two ways you can go with this. You can make them a dark color. I thought about doing a blue or a purple to make them stand out a whole bunch. Ended up going a little bit more subtle, make them a bit more human. Also, I went with green because I kind of like the idea of there's a green ichor inside of him instead of ordinary blood. But yeah, I did go for a bit more subtle route here. Makes it easier to work in the flesh tone. Doesn't stand out so much, but you could definitely use a different color here. Like I said, I think purple would work well, or even a deeper green might be sufficient. And then for the highlights, we work in some pale flesh to our dead flesh, and just trying to work them in a little bit closer to the skin tone that we already have so they don't stand out too much. Despite me just saying that I didn't want the veins to stand out too much, I thought they could have used a little bit more color, so I decided to give them a glaze of Escorpena Green, just to add a little bit more rich green color to them. And just working this color mainly into the main body of the vein so I wouldn't have to redo the highlights. Back to the rest of the skin because we are not done working in bruised flesh colors. I now have a mix of red violet and stormy blue, just adding a bit more bruised flesh in the recessed areas wherever I think I need it. Also working this color in around all the little pimples, zits, whatever, pot marks, boils. There we go. Let's go with boils all around the skin. Speaking of the boils, I decided to paint them as pimples, big old pussy-filled whiteheads. Ugh. And we are using Rose Brown, and then to highlight it, I've mixed in a healthy amount of white. Just give a nice whitehead, ready to pop look to them. Again, yeah. For the hair, I decided to go a little bit wild. We have a little bit of green on the model. I wanted to increase the amount of green, so we are going with bright green hair. And for that, we're using Escorpena Green. For the highlights, we just mix in some white. And I wanted to go real extreme on the highlights on the hair just to make them really stand out. So I believe I did 2 highlights going almost to pure white at the tips. And then for the shade, a little black green ink towards the base of the hair. And that about covers it for part 1. We painted a nice jaundice, kind of diseased skin thing going on here. And part 2 is going to get much more exciting because didn't really have any direction or theme I was going to take this thing until I added a little bit of red color to the nose and also the green hair. But if you saw the thumbnail, I think you know where we're going next.
There's a flaming moose blocking traffic on I-35W northbound.
Would somebody please put me out? I seem to be on fire.